good to see all the students again in another Demo Thursday. And as all you all know, these demos are moments where we have um, teachers and practitioners, in this case, university professors, sharing their research and how the research is actually transforming their classroom practice, how they're making their classrooms better by doing research and applying that research in class. So today's guest is a very special, well, I think I say that every week anyway, but another very special guest, just Professor Edison Castrillón-Ángel from Universidad, Católica, Amigó, and another researcher affiliated with the Literacies and Second Language Project. Edison recently completed his master's, and he already has a very impressive resume with a number of publications already in progress, some under review, some very close to coming out. He's already presented on national and international conferences. He's recently helped us submit a proposal for the ARA conference next year. And he's already very active in the topic he's going to tell you about today, the topic of critical digital literacy, CDL. And I can arguably say Edison is becoming one of the emerging scholars in this field in Colombia, a field that's still under a lot of construction. And I'm very happy that it's a local talent, a homegrown talent who's leading the charge in this particular field. So that's all I'll say. And as always, I remind people who will watch this video eventually that this is part of the LSLP in session series that we have in our YouTube channel. So without any further ado, Edison, I will silence my microphone. I will stop sharing my camera, enjoy my coffee, and enjoy the session for everybody. Remember, you can interact with Edison at any time, ask questions
Sure.
by turning your microphone or simply writing questions in the chat. And Edison will be happy to exchange in conversation with all of you. So Edison, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raul. Thank you for that invitation, guys. Welcome to this special section. As always, it is a pleasure for me to talk about this interesting topic that is something that calls my attention a lot because believe me that this is something that is part of my life right now. And it's something that that I want to share with you because we are facing a new era, and obviously we are facing new troubles, academic problems, and we need to reshape our teaching practices. And of course, the main idea with this kind of presentation, that with this kind of conversation, is to enjoy first, and second, to discuss and to talk about this interesting topic that is critical digital literacy, and also how these kind of practices could affect our classroom, and how could we apply these kind of things inside our class, inside our practicing. So today's topic is critical digital literacy, living in a critical and a digital age. It is, I consider myself is so appropriated right now for everything that we are facing. And of course, it's so important, guys, to realize that this is something that we need to accept as an educators. And first of all, as Raul said, my name is Edison Ferney Castrillón-Ángel. I say my second name because my mother said that it's so beautiful, so I enjoy it as well. Edison Ferney Castrillón-Ángel. I had the honor to work with Raul in this field of literacy, in about focus on digital literacies, because it is a work that I started when I was in my bachelor, in my professional program. I am also a social communicator and journalist, and I in that moment I try to identify how could I integrate these kind of practices in terms of communication with education. So now we have here something interesting for sharing with you guys. Feel free whenever you want to ask a question. And this is a conversation. Obviously, we have some slides and something for guiding the conversation, but feel free in order to ask whatever you want. And if you have some questions immediately, please I feel free to stop the conversation and start listening to you. So my first question in this moment, guys, is what do you consider is critical digital literacy? Maybe we need to understand what is critical, what is digital, and of course, what is literacy. Yes, but this is a very interesting topic that I focused on the time with Aguilera and Pandia's words that I could say that is a combination of several social perspectives and what it means to be literate, what it means to be critical, and what it means to live and learn in a digital age. So step by step, I want to stop here for clarifying something. Combination, of course, it is a combination because if you noticed, being critical is something that are all the time in our life, but that is the sense of this specific determination or this specific concept. Because be critical, it means that you are all the time making wondering for the contemporaneous situations or for that kind of things that most of the time we need to face in our life. So being critical, it also means that you participate and you are involved, for example, in that specific uh, travels or how or maybe you are reflecting about how could I participate or how can I improve my teaching practices, and you are reflecting all the time. So being critical is being in constantly reflection with our teaching practices, obviously as an teachers and as educators. Digital, in that case, guys, with this combination, digital is something that we are facing nowadays. Yeah, those are those practices that it could be even face-to-face practices, but also it is an environment, yeah, a digital environment, and how we need to understand that kind of digital environments, what is our identity, that we are going to talk in a while about how could we develop identity in a digital environment, for example, and how or what kind of behaviors we need to take into account at the time of in facing a digital environment, for example. In literacy, in these terms of literacy, I really appreciate um, the work that Mora in all the LSLP project, we are working together for clarifying, for understanding, for reshaping this beautiful term that is literacy. And as Freire also said, it is a way for reading and writing in different ways our words. Yes, in in that terms, I want to clarify something as well. That is, literacy is also reading in a socio-critical way. Yeah, yeah, we are accustomed to understand that, for example, literacy is you know, or reading is a cognitive process. Yeah, and that was our idea. That is what's only a cognitive process, reading and writing. But nowadays we need to understand that that kind of literacy we need to be, or we need to understand that literacy also it's involved with a socio-cultural environment in which a socio-cultural sense, because being critical or being being literate nowadays, it is also having the sense for understanding that writing and reading, or reading and writing, they have a huge sense with the social. Yeah, it's understanding the social. It is not only a kind of repetition, or it is not only to understand that the literacy, or I know how to read only because I repeat a phrase. I know how to read or I know how to write only because I have the skill of typing or writing something. Now it is because you are able for understanding, for example, what is happening around you, what is happening in terms of politics, in terms of power, what is happening in terms of education. What is your role as educator here? So you are reflecting about a lot of social cultural perspectives and about a lot of social cultural practices, yes, that need to be so fresh and so clear at the time of being literate, yes. So this kind of combination, and when I refer to Aguilera and Pandya, I said that, or they said that is a social perspectives, yeah, a combination of several social perspectives, yes, social perspectives. In you can see, you can notice here that is not a cognitive perspective. Now it's a social perspective, but because it also involves the cognitive, it also involves the society, it also involves everything around you. So social perspectives on what it means to be literate and what it means to be critical, that we already talked about, and what it means to live and learn in a digital age, guys. And here I want to make a special parenthesis. When you are able of living in a digital age, it means that you, for example, are aware about how interact in a digital environment. I mean, before sharing an information, maybe because you have the capacity of reflecting about the information that you receive every single day through your cell phone, that means that you are an special critical, because nowadays most of the time we are living in a digital age, even through the pandemic time. This is the way for facing our educational system, yeah. We are living in this moment in digital environments, but we need to have a behavior, we need to have an identity. For example, when Raul said to me, Edison, now you have the possibility of sharing because you are the administration, you are the leader in this moment of this meeting, that is an empowerment, yeah. So we are aware about these kind of things that is happening nowadays in our context, yeah. How could we empower our students, for example, for being leaders in a digital environment, or how could we work in order to be or to stay at the same level? So that means that we are facing this term. So I really like this term, and I am still learning. I need to confess that I am still learning in writing and reading about these interesting topics. Thanks to God, we are in this moment involved with several authors and with several practices like this, for example, that all the time make us to reflect about this topic. So this is the main idea in how I understand this beautiful definition that Aguilera and Pandya in this moment, or in that moment, gave us, because it's so brilliant. So guys, I want to talk here for today. I want to talk about my experience as a CDL researcher, and also you may want to share with you my experience about how podcasting, or podcasting as a CDL, an example that it was my master research work. So I really want to talk with you about what I find with this interesting research work. What are we doing in this moment in terms of podcasting as a critical digital literacy? And of course, that I think is the sense of this meeting is I want to tell you what I am doing with my classes, because nowadays I am a professor in Amigó University, and I am practicing, or I involved these kind of practices into my curricula, and I into my teaching practices. So how now I want to share with you about my experience sharing podcasting with my students as a critical digital literacy practice, yeah. And maybe some recommendations. It is a simple recommendation about how to apply critical digital literacy practices in our classroom, yeah, in your classroom, yeah. Mm, that I feel that I could offer some specific recommendations and advices if you are interested, for example, in changing your teaching practices, or maybe if you notice that there are some practices that in this moment they are not working as you expect. So maybe this is a good point for reflecting on. Yeah, and questions, but as I told you, um, questions are all the time, and even in this topic, that all the time we are questioning everything. So, okay, first, my experience. I started with this topic specifically when I met Raul. I remember that I was interested in working with digital literacy and when something critical. And I remember in one of there in Café Revolutions meeting when he said to me, "Okay, Edison, now I think that you need to work with critical digital literacy." And when I start reading on that, I noticed, guys, these specific things. First, that and for understanding this specific term, I need to change from a perspective because my idea about reading and writing was from a cognitive perception that I told you, and I need to change in that moment that reading and writing is also it is also or it also has a sociocultural sense, and even more than we believe. Yeah. So when I understood that reading and writing, it also involves the sociocultural and the real sense of the people, I understand that reading and writing goes beyond that just reading and writing in a book, or maybe I mean reading and writing goes beyond what you find in a book, because more of the time you need to face, you need to contrast, you need to have a sense, you need to have the possibility of changing, reshaping, and having a lot of abilities, yeah, a lot of skills for understanding one information. Yeah, it is like a kind of, I remember one day when one student said to Raul and me and said, okay, this is like a kind of, my goodness, like a kind of, I don't know, like it is like a way for discerning the information. Yeah, discerning the information, and then you select what is good and what is bad, and what is useful or what is or what cannot apply, or what can we not apply in for sharing. And then it is like a kind of process of discerning information as well in a digital age. Yeah. And also, I understood here, talking about this second point, that is when we talk about critical digital literacy, also we need to become students from simple people who receive an information, and they need to be critical consumer and active producers. Guys, and here I want to make a little parenthesis, how to become our students from passive consumers or passive receivers of information to critical consumers and active producers. What kind of practices we need to do in terms of achieving this kind of things in our practice. So here is the first reflection. Yeah, as you as educator, or you as a pre-service teacher in this moment, uh, how could you apply in a digital environment practices for changing your students, or for reshaping your students to passive consumers, to critical consumers and active producers? So what are you going to do? And that is the main idea that I want to be focused on. Practices and tools for empowering students. Yeah, of course. Here, I want to clarify something. And it is not only having the computer in our classroom. It is, for example, when we talk about critical digital literacy practices, it doesn't mean, for example, that if you have a computer inside your classroom, maybe you are using a digital environment, or maybe you are applying critical digital literacy practices. For applying critical digital practices, you need to empower your students. You need your students start um, making questions about their realities, about their narratives, about their life, even about their teaching practices, yeah, or even about their or policy system or something like that, yeah. So we need to understand that these kind of things, guys, goes beyond having a cell phone or or a laptop in our classroom. What are we going to do with that kind of things? Who, where, yeah, and we need to read first the context before applying some kind of these tools, yeah. And what is the main purpose? Empowering students, yeah. And remember that the main idea is becoming our students from passive to active, yeah, and to reflect and to reflect about a specific context. So here, guys, I really want to talk about this experience. In terms of that practices, I applied podcasting. Remember that podcasting is an scenario that I gave to my students. That I worked with reservist teachers, and I gave to them the possibility of talking about their narratives. And and obviously, the main idea was to identify how or what kind of narratives my students needs to tell me, and how maybe I could identify that a pre-service teacher, obviously a pre-service teacher is he or she is also a person, a human being that is feeling, that is inside the classroom with one specific frustrations, or maybe with one intentions, with one skills, yeah. And there are a lot of practices here, guys, or there are a lot of narratives that I found with my students, yeah. And I was wondering in that time in applying one specific practice or one critical digital literacy practice for listening my students and for sharing with them, for empower them, for giving them a voice, for giving them a freedom scenario for talking about what they consider necessary in that moment. Yeah. And it was amazing. So in that time, I noticed, for example, podcasting as a good a scenario for sharing that kind of experiences. Well, I identified three specific components when you applied podcasting as a critical digital literacy practice with your students. First, you offer to your students a free expression and empowerment scenario. Yeah, believe me, guys. When you listen your students, when you have the possibility of giving them a tool or an scenario that is in this term, or something for they empower themselves, you can receive a lot of information from them, and even you can learn a lot from them. So here we talk about our families, frustrations, some narratives that most of the time they said, Edison, is the first time that I talk with you, or I talked with someone different to my mother about this story. And it's very good because they feel comfortable with these kind of things. And my students gave me the possibility of improving my listening skill. And when I talk about listening, I mean that this is the possibility of understanding that we are not only or we are not alone in a classroom. Most of the time we believe that we arrive to the classroom and we have the last word, or we only have the possibility of speaking. No, when we talk, even when we talk about communication, guys, when we talk about a process of communication, we need to understand that communication is the ability of putting in common, yeah, communication, putting in common a specific message. So most of the time we go to the classroom only for transmitting an information. Yeah, we only inform, we only transmit an information, but we don't understand our students' realities, our students' point of view, and we only want to transmit an information. So the question is, what kind of teacher do you want to do? Yeah, only the teacher that is in front of a classroom and transmit, or in front of a screen, and only talking about one specific topic, and that's it. Yeah. Think twice, because the most important thing in this moment, guys, is having the possibility of listening our students. Podcasting give us that specific sense that I really appreciate. And obviously, they were pre-service teachers, pre-service English teachers, and I used this scenario also for using the English language for a purpose. And what was the purpose? Talking about their narratives. And even I learned a lot from them. I consider that I improved a lot, even my level of English when I applied podcasting, specifically the speaking skill, when I was applying these kind of tools with them. So I remember that most of the time, as a English educator, we receive a lot of message, and people said, okay, it is not only grammar, it is not only repetition, it is not only a translingual method. That's it, a lot of things. But when you use the English with a purpose, you feel empowered. Yeah. And that is something that calls my attention a lot, because my students, even there, some of them, they hadn't very good level of English, but when they were talking about their own experiences, they have the possibility of improving their skills. It was amazing. I could show you the research work in some testimonies about it. Yeah. And also, guys, with this kind of practice, one of the most important ideas was that we contribute to the creation of digital communities to exchange and question narratives between colleges. Yeah. And it is amazing. Yeah, because I have one idea, even that I was discussing with my mentor. What is the difference between a podcast and an MP3 sound? Simple. A podcast is uh, is public in a website, and you can offer questions, you can reshape, you can contrast, you can give your opinion, you can agree, you can disagree, and maybe you could give your opinion through a photo, and you can interact with the person, and that is a podcast. From my perspective, it is um, a possibility. It is a possibility for living one narrative, for interacting at the same time. Yeah, because when you use for a Podomatic, for example, the Podomatic website, and you post your MP3, yeah, you post your MP3, uh, that is a podcast. Before publishing, it is only an MP3 project, and that's it. Yeah. And here we create communities, because you find in that websites, we find people who disagree or agree with your ideas or support your ideas, or maybe some students who said to you, or some participants who said to you, yeah, I really understand, because it happens to me as well. Or yeah, I disagree with you because I had this experience and I don't feel that it's in that way. So you are all the time reshaping and evaluating, yeah, and assessing the narrative of the message, and the message is constantly in a movement. Yeah, when you use a podcasting project, for example. Yeah. So that offers to me this sensation. And I want to share with you, for example, this podcast that is one that calls my attention a lot. And he is one of my students. And he said to me, Edison, I want to talk about tattoos. He has more or less 20 tattoos on his body, and he said, I want to how can I say, like to inform what is the meaning of a tattoo in my body. And it is not only what people think about. So try to listen these kind of things, guys. And let me share my computer sound, optimize screen. And now I'm going to share the podcast. Can you listen?
Yes, but it
Okay.
sounds.
Yeah. But it's, don't worry. It is like a tattoo machine. So.
Oh,
Great.
okay.
Yeah.
Hi everybody, my name is Lorenzo. I'm from Medellin. I'm 23 years old. I'm studying to becoming an English teacher. I like to spend time with family, friends. I like tattoos, and also I love to play guitar. Today I'm going to talk about what is a tattoo, what a tattoo means, and in which way it affects or improves my life. I decided to talk about tattoos because people has a wrong vision about tattooed people, especially in our context. There still exists many beliefs that young people like me that has tattoo are violent, aggressive, and many other things. People discredit us and they don't know who we are and why we has marks in over the skin.
Es para recordar lo que quiero, es para no olvidar el ayer, es para llevarlo con orgullo y para no volverla a cometer. Es para recordar lo que quiero, es para no olvidar el ayer, es para llevarlo con orgullo y para no volverla a cometer.
Many years ago, tattoos were seen with different purposes. Ancient cultures used tattoos to differentiate one tribe from other. Other cultures used them to distinguish the hierarchy between them. And also some cultures saw tattoos with protective and magic aims. But what is a tattoo? A tattoo is not just a representation of art on the skin, or just a simple draw print in the body. In most of cases, a meaning of a tattoo goes beyond of what we can see superficially. Why many people doesn't understand the facts that are behind a tattoo? Nowadays, people that has tattoo are seen like people without goals in their lives, like rebel people. I have suffered that kind of abuse by people with questions like, how will you look like when you get older? Why do you do those ugly things? But nobody makes questions like, what is the meaning of a tattoo? Why do you love tattoos? In my case, are not just lines on my skin. Each one of them has different story to tell. Each one means facts that are or were relevant in my life, and also I believe in some of them like charms. My passion for tattoos started when I was a child, and I saw tattoos as the way in which people could represent what they feel, but I didn't find reasons to make me a tattoo. Sadly, I made my first tattoo in my right leg when a cousin passed away in his motorcycle. It was very hard for me because he was more than a cousin. He was a father figure that I never had. It was one of the worst episodes in my life. That was the reason I made this number 16 and 2 flags in my leg. The number 16 was the number he used to paste in her motorcycle when he was in a competition. With this incident, my love for tattoos became in a lifestyle, and all of those important events for me, I wanted to print on my skin. After that, my second tattoo comes to me. It was with my grandfather's death. So I started to think why I should wait till someone pass away to make them feel important. So I decided to tattoo the name of my parents, my 2 uncles and my grandmother. After all these things, I always have been great fan of the Egyptian culture, and I believe in many of their things. For example, the end cross that means life, or in short words, life after death, and many others Egyptian symbols that I believe that it protects me about bad energies, envy and other things. and I have the deity Anubis, who is the guard of graves, and also is the guide for dead people. For all those reasons, and like me, there are a lot of people that has tattoos with deeper meanings, with different and amazing stories behind each one, and I believe that people shouldn't give judgments if they don't know what is the reason of tattoos, or what are those elements that take that person to make a tattoo.
What is your first reaction when you see a person with a big tattoo? And what do you think about tattoos?
I would like to thank you all for hearing my story with tattoos, and also I'd like to talk more about them. I hope you come back to our channel to hear more amazing things we have for you.
Está en mi piel inyectando la tinta, un código eterno que da honor al que resista. Fina línea blanco y negro, perforaciones de mito. El instinto más salvaje sobre el cuerpo está escrito. Adictos al tatuaje, a este rito anárquico. Y Paulito delinea un símbolo prehispánico.
Okay, guys, so it was only a simple or a great example, about how could we apply or how could we use the students' narratives in order to create a better classroom. Yes, for example, here we could notice that Lorenzo, he used tattoo as a way to write and read their own narrative, yeah, and their own story, yeah, and that is the meaning of I try to be focused here, guys, for understanding a little while what literacy is. For example, when you see this lion, yeah, it transmits a message, and it doesn't mean that it needs to have, for example, some graphics or some letters for understanding that specific message. Lorenzo, for example, is an open book that you could read immediately just watching his body or his their arms. Yeah, so I used this experience. I enjoyed a lot, guys, because as Lorenzo's story, I received another stories, and it was an amazing practice, because I remember when they built a community and someone said, okay, Lorenzo, thank you so much for clarifying that, because I felt the same with my family when I had my first tattoo. I remember my mother's perception, and I remember my friends talking about several things, and it's so difficult, and it was so difficult for me understanding at that moment. But nowadays, when they find similarities, and when they find people with these kind of stories, they build a community, and that kind of community supports each other. Now, for example, they continue speaking and discussing about several things, and now, for example, we continue talking, and we want to go beyond with this kind of practices, because it's something that is transforming our teaching education teaching educational system. And I consider, guys, that we need to go beyond. We need to apply these virtual environments, this digital age, and we need to apply it in terms of improving our practices. Yes, so through this experience, I identify three specific components. First, the transformation. When I apply these kind of processes, guys, I noticed that the students transforms their point of view. They come to the classroom with first perception, yeah, they have some brainstorming about one specific ideas, but when you used, for example, critical digital practices, um, um, in a very good way, in a very good planning way, you could transform. And from the very beginning, you as the leader, you need to identify what is the goal that you want your students achieved, because most of the time we believe that, as I told you, most of the time we believe that if we bring the computer to the classroom, the better smartphone or the better internet connection, and that's it. No, we need to planning. Yeah, we need to plan, sorry. We need to plan, we need to organize everything before starting. Yeah, doing a critical digital literacy practice. And you need to empower your students, guys. You need to empower your students because they need to feel that they have a role inside the teaching, inside the practice. And and you need to even change the role within. I remember, for example, that most of the time I have to be the learner, and my students taught me a lot of things. For example, with the the how to handle one specific tool or something like that. Yeah, I remember that most of the time I was the student, and they were my teachers. So we need to change our roles most of the time here, because our students have most of the time something very special for teaching you as a teacher. So be humble for understanding that as a teachers, we are also for learning in a virtual environment or in a physical classroom, or I don't know, in this educational system. And sure, I through this component, for example, the critical production, because my student produced, they changed, for example, the idea of simply receiving information. Now they were producing, and they were producing in a critical way, and they were the leaders, they were the designers, they were the broadcasters, and even the evaluators, the reshapers of their own experiences, and of course their contests and their own narratives. So now they are critical producers, and something that calls my attention a lot, guys. It is like nowadays my students, for example, I was talking with them, and I said to them, okay, before or when you receive an specific information, think twice for sharing it. First, it's useful. Yeah, can you share it? How are you going to benefit, for example, with that information? It is that information useful for you as an English teacher, or for your students for improving, I don't know, maybe their listening, speaking skills or something like that? This information, what is the sense of this information? Who produced this information? What is the real purpose of this information, and what it pertains with us? Yeah, maybe if you are reading, yeah, because we are in sales and we have some specific I don't know, sales in a supermarket. How can you read that kind of information before taking an action? But when you take an action, what happened if you take an action? What happened before? So here, through this practice, guys, questions are the base. Yeah, reflecting are the base. Yeah, reflecting is the base. Oh, sorry. Taking into consideration that question, that reflection, that transformation, and what is the purpose of this? Yeah, transform your teaching beliefs, transform your point of view, transform your ideas about one tattoo. Yeah, because I am sure that, for example, when Lorenzo showed his tattoos in front of the schools for the first time, in front of the classroom for the first time, maybe they suppose, oh, he's a dangerous person. Yeah, but when he explained every single tattoo on his body, I'm sure that the classmates transformed or reshaped that first perception thanks to that practice. So that is the main idea, guys, with these specific things. I have questions. Now it's time for questions and for drinking a little water. I don't know, guys, if you have some questions.
Well, thank you, Edison. Thank you so much for this presentation. Now, there are some questions here, and there's already one question from Camila. She's asking, what were the challenges during podcasting practice with your students, or like difficulties or issues that you had to face? And I think I would like you to answer the question, not only talking about the challenges, but also how you sorted out the challenges, because sometimes I think like the conversation is, oh, we spend all the time talking about the problems we had, and we never tell people, yeah, this is what I did to solve them. So can you address that particular question? And everybody else, remember, if you have questions, you're very welcome to write them in the chat, and I can relay them to others or myself, or you can simply open your microphone directly and talk to Edison.
Yeah, well, it is for Camila Correa. Camila, thank you so much for asking. And yeah, it's a very interesting question because sure, I have a lot of challenges and some difficulties with these specific things because, for example, the first time for meeting the students with computers or with their laptops. I remember when I applied this research inside the university, and I remember that my students said to me, Edison, sometimes it's difficult to bring my own laptop to my university because the transportation, yeah, because a lot of reasons. And I remember that at the first time I was so I feel the limit for using computers because we need to recognize that during these practices we need some devices. It could be just your cell phone, or it could be only a microphone. Yeah, but you need to have some resources in order to develop these kind of projects. Also, if you have a very good cell phone, that is enough for applying this kind of projects. But most of the time, for example, for editing the sounds or for applying some effects, it is better having the computer. So at the first time I had that problem. And also, okay, and how I solved the problem, I remember that I need to talk with the principals in the university, with my director, and she said to me, Edison, yeah, feel free. You are gonna use the system classroom, yeah, with more or less 10 computers, and they offered to me specific place for working with the project during 1 hour or 2 hours. I remember 2 hours per week. Yeah, it was, I believe it was Monday and Friday, I think so. But thanks to God, I received a lot of support from the university. And something that also, it was a challenge for me, it was to convince the students to talk about their own narratives. Because I remember that it was the first semester with them, and obviously I had some classes, even I was with them in another classes, in another class, so sorry. But to win that confidence and something like that, it was difficult for me because I need to express to them, for example, that it was a research work and they could speak in a freedom way, and it is something very useful for us. But how I solved that, I obviously I want their confidence, and also I promised them to use another name. For example, Lorenzo is not Lorenzo, and they spoke a lot, and they felt comfortable. They felt comfortable in order to talk about these specific things. But now, even they are part of my classes, and I feel great with this experience. And something that I want to clarify here, guys, with you is like for doing a podcasting project, it is not required having a media lab or having a super sophisticated room. No, even if you are able of you have the skills for manipulating your cell phone or your smartphone in a very good way, that is enough. I had that perception. And I don't know if I will remember when he said to me, "Oh my goodness, you are crazy if you pretend to do a media lab in your university, because it is not a critical digital literacy sense. Maybe it is another thing, guys. For doing a podcast or for doing a podcasting project, you don't need to have a super sophisticated classroom in order to organize a lot of things."
All right, we have a few more questions here, Edison. So I'm gonna read some
Thank
of them.
you.
There's a question from Luisa, and she was wondering about how was your first day of teaching using podcasts, and what were your expectations when you started using podcasts in your class?
For being honest, I need to confess something in this meeting. I learned English by myself, and I never went to an academic or something like that. Even when I started my specialization, I remember that in the interview, someone asked me, "Okay, how do you learn English?" And I said, "No, it is by myself." And he said to me, "Oh my goodness, you need to be clear, because the academic English is another story, my friend. So you need to read a lot, and you need to apply different strategies for improving your English skills." So in that way, when I was studying my journalist program, I remember that I in one classroom I used podcast for improving Spanish skills, yeah, in the speech, something like that. And I said, "Oh my goodness, now maybe it could serve for improving my English skills and obviously my English speech." So I started doing podcasts by myself, yeah, and listen myself, yeah, and that was my first experiences using podcast, my own podcast. Maybe if you believe that you are not very good, or maybe you want to improve your speech, your syntaxes, I don't know, whatever you want, you could try it, because it could be a very good strategy for improving your speaking and obviously your speech. So I remember that when I start applying to my students, it also works. So I said, okay, I'm going to continue applying podcast. And when I found Raul, and he said, okay, but podcast as a critical digital literacy practice, and I start reading about a lot what critical digital literacy is, or in the perception. So I noticed that sense that it was for with a sense, with a purpose, with an student contest. What is the real purpose of? What is the kind of information that we want to spread? What is the purpose of that information? Who is going to receive that information? Who is going to create? So a lot of questions came to my mind. And now I start designing podcasts with them, but with a real sense, with a contest, with a real purpose. And it was amazing, guys. I don't know if I answered that question, but that is the main idea.
Well, why don't we just ask Luisa? Luisa, did Edison answer your question? Did he address the question you had in mind?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay,
awesome.
thank you, Luisa.
All right, we have two more questions here. One question is from Juliana. Juliana wants to know, did you use other kinds of activities for critical digital literacy besides
Thank
podcasts?
you, thank you. Well, for be honest, I'm so new using critical digital literacy practices because I had my graduation just in February of this year, and I was working a lot with podcasting. But something, Juliana, that calls my attention a lot, it is, for example, when I apply a photo with my students, now I ask them, hey, please take into account the reality, take into account what is the real purpose, take into account what is the perception that you want to transmit or that you want to communicate. So sorry. So nowadays, for example, I am so active in exploring another practices, as for example, video clips, or for example, tech talks, or a lot of practices that I could become in a critical, or I could yeah, allow, or that practices that allow me to use critical digital literacy sense in transform. But in this moment, for example, I am advising some students. They are bachelor degrees, yeah, and they are pre-service teachers as well. And I had the honor of having there in the university another students who in this moment are working with critical digital literacy, and they are going to propose to me some practices, and of course I will need to read a lot and to give them another sense. And guys, something that I have here, I'm going to looking for, it is this book that Raul shared with me, that is Critical Digital Literacies, Social Practices. And I still read a lot because, for example, I here explain how to use social media as a critical digital literacy practice, or how to use, for example, urban jump, yeah, or simple dialogues, yeah, storytelling, a lot of specific practices that maybe, guys, it could become very useful in your teaching practices. It is something that I really invite you in, and we are here as LSLP. We are here for receiving proposal and for working together because, guys, believe me, I really want to continue working on these kind of things. I am working with Raul and with another authors writing on this specific field. And I recognize that we need to do a lot of things in terms of this field because it is, we could say that it is a field so new. But with this pandemic time, guys, I was reflecting a lot, reflecting how could I apply critical digital literacy practices for improving this, for improving that, for doing this. Yeah, a lot of things, guys. Welcome for writing, and welcome for exploring, and welcome to do a lot of things with you. And we are here for exploring as well.
There are two more questions here. So I'm just going to throw the questions together and you can answer them at your leisure. So the first question, it comes from Sergio. What is your criteria, or what are your criteria to evaluate the podcasts? And then the other question is Camila once again. Did you have the chance to find out how your students felt with the empowerment process? I mean, I guess as a result of creating their own podcast. So really the questions, question one is to talk about the criteria that you use to assess the podcast, and then kind of share with us how your students felt in this whole process.
Yeah, I don't know, for example, something here for criteria, I already told you something related to this. And my criteria, my criteria with these kind of things, guys, is I don't want a simple record becomes an MP3 format and that's it. And I already explained for you what is the difference. When I talk with my students, I said to them that this is not only an MP3 record. And why? Because yeah, you could record an audio, you could record something without planning, or maybe it could be useful, I don't know. But first they need to build a draft. Yeah, they need to write on the field, they need to research, yeah, about the field, they need to be so concrete. And something, I don't know if you noticed in Roberto's podcast, when he finished with some questions, because he said, okay guys, now you know my story, my story. So what is your first perception with when you see someone, when you see someone with tattoos? So also one of the criteria is finish your podcast with a continue a story, yeah? Maybe a question for reflecting. Finish your podcast with a reflection. Because on the contrary, it is only an MP3. In the sound, it is just that, a sound, yeah? But when you build a sound with a reflection, with a question, maybe it contributes to reshape, to rethink, yeah, a lot of specific things in your practices. So that is, for me, some of the criteria. Even when I was doing the research work, that I proposed kind of chart, kind of table, something like that, for building a podcasting project as a critical digital literacy practice. And I remember that I proposed 10 steps for doing it. And what do you need to do before, during, and after the podcast? Yeah. Guys, and what is the how my students felt? That is, it was the other question, Ro. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. How your students felt with this process and feeling
But
empowered.
but I don't know if it felt in terms of scores or something
No,
like
no,
that.
felt. As in, how did they feel about it?
Ah, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, how they felt with this experience, Raul. Something, and guys, something that calls my attention is they felt that they were part of a process, of an academic process. So they felt yeah, now even they feel right now, they feel as a leaders, they feel that they are able to communicate a message. Now they recognize that that the 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 English is not only for going to the classroom and talking about one simple present or something like that. No, they recognize the purpose of English, and even they express to me that they felt like they are researchers, because they need to research a lot for building their stories. So in that way, they felt, yeah, they improved a lot their research skills. So they are, in this moment, they are, or they believe in their own stories. They believe in that kind of realities could change when they speak. Yeah, because for example, I remember another podcast that it was Natalia's podcast, where she talked about how she or how was the perception with their fathers, their parents' alcohol issues, problems. So they, I remember that she said to me, Edison, now I feel light. Yeah, I feel like if I went to the priest and I confessed all my secrets, and now I feel like I am relaxed. That is great. It's amazing. It's giving them the possibility of having a storm behind them. It's great.
All right, we have two more questions, and I think this will be the last two because it's already it's almost 4, so we need to start bringing this this party home because students have class in 20 minutes. But two very important questions. One question is from John, and he asked the question: how could we use podcasting as CDL practice with students with impairments like vision or hearing? So students with disabilities. That's the first question. The second question, well, that's a good question, but you have to answer it.
Yeah.
And the second question, it's from Natalia. Natalia wants to know, are we just talking about college students, or can this tool be adapted to lower levels considering their skills? So 2 questions: use podcast as the practice when you have students with particular disabilities, and adapting this to lower levels and other grades besides college. So those are questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, and for this question, because it made me to reflect a lot. It is a challenge as well. Well, John, my friend, you need to take into account that these kind of strategies or these kind of practices, it doesn't require a specific way of writing as the common that we know. And maybe if someone, for example, in this case, impairments with vision, yeah, even in the social communication program, I studied with a person, and he's blind, and I remember that they made a lot of podcasts, and it was a very interesting experience because they used another formats, because in this case you are building a message with a sound, or with a sound, sorry, and you can use it. And they, for example, for talking, there are no an impediment for doing. If you have the ability of talking, you could record, and if you record, you could transmit. My question here is with that hearing, people who they cannot hear, or they have some hearing troubles, because I don't know why, how can you transmit in this moment a message, if you can't hearing, because one of the specific things through the podcast or through these practices, for example, is building the community, and obviously is having the capacity of questioning, reflecting, doing. But if you cannot hear that kind of things, maybe it could be impossible from my case, or until this moment. Maybe I could realize tomorrow or in another thing. Believe me that I'm going to read a lot about this specific question. I already take my imprint pan screen, and it is something that
but let me jump in and throw you a bone there, Edison, and help you a little bit to answer that question. Okay, one of the first things you would have to consider is that possibly the platform itself, that some of the platforms for podcasting are not necessarily, they don't have that possibility, because the easiest way to deal with that in the case of students with hearing disabilities is closed caption. And closed caption has been around forever. Actually, YouTube already has the possibility that even, for example, all the videos that we have in the series, YouTube automatically captions them. Of course, the closed caption is still, it's far from perfect, and voice recognition software is still in stages of improvement in that sense, but that's a possibility. Obviously, in the case of podcasting, it's even easier because you already, in many cases, you have a script.
Yeah.
All you have to do is just kind of put the script, just kind of use the script as a way to do the closed caption. And there are possibilities. Now, the question is, how can we make some of those platforms that we use for podcasting more accessible? And I think that will be the larger question that it's going to be very much in the air, and probably the question that as you continue evolving on your work on podcasting, you're going to have to consider. It's
Sure. And even John, thank you so much for that question, because for being honest, I is one, yeah, it's a brilliant question, because it makes me to reflect in how can I be more, or how could we create more accessible platforms in order to involve this population that also obviously are part of our academic system nowadays, and we need to do a lot of things. Yeah, and for example there, yeah, the closed caption, it could be a very useful tool, but we need to organize. Still, we need to organize, we need to do a lot of things, guys. We need to design, we need to plan, and it's great. Maybe in the future it could be another path for continuing doing these kind of things, and it's perfect. Yeah, and here, for example, the Natalia's question, when she said, are we just thinking about, okay, college students, or can we do allowing to lower students consider these skills? Sure. Even working with children, it is amazing. It is amazing. And you, I really appreciate if you have the possibility, Natalia, working with this, because the children, for example, they have a lot of creativity, and you could take advantage of that creativity in order to know, for example, what they think about one specific story, how they can reshape, for example, the Disney story, yeah, in their perception using these kind of tools or skills, yeah. For example, yeah, they know the typical story about Cinderella, yeah, but how they, or how can they reshape that Cinderella's story when they use, for example, a podcast? What is their version? How can they transform, reshape, yeah, the characters? Yeah, what can I do with that kind of thing? Yeah, there are a lot of things that you can do. You can do, my friends, with these kind of practices.
right. Excellent, excellent, Edison. Thank you. So I think we're gonna stop right here. I mean, we could go on with this, but then we have some time limits and scheduling issues for everybody. So
Yeah.
we're gonna call it a day. But once again, Edison, thank you so much for sharing your research with the students, for doing it in a way that is so genuine and so um, that you can see that this is you, and you can see that this is the work that you do. And I think it's important for, and I would just make a commentary about that thing in the interview when they told you about the academic thing. That first of all, I have no idea what they're talking about. I don't mean, because this idea of being academic, I mean, I think a lot of people, I mean, a lot of young scholars are wrestling with that idea of what it means to be an academic, or what does it mean to sound like an academic. I just think an academic is a person who talks about research and makes it, talks about it in a way that you can present it to experts in the field, or people who just
Yeah.
who just got this is the first time they heard about it, and they can do it equally well, and they can adapt the vocabulary, and they can adapt the discourse to the different audiences. And I think that's what makes, but I think most importantly, I think academics, and the really, really good academics, the ones who make a mark in the field, the one thing I've learned over the years as I've met some of them, it's they're basically themselves. They don't pretend to be something they're not. They
Yeah.
don't pretend to act like something they aren't. They never forget where they came from. They never
Yeah.
forget who got them there, who helped them in the journey, and they never forget the responsibility they have with the generations coming behind them. In the sense that as you grow into your role as an academic, you start becoming a role model for the generations that are following, and they start looking up to you for inspiration. So, I mean, that would be my way to kind of my commentary to that. It's like, you are an academic because you're talking about research and you're sharing it from your position and how that's impacting your work and how that's impacting your life. Anything other than that is just a lot of huffing and puffing that there are a lot of people in academic or myself that are not very keen on that anymore. So I really appreciated that you brought the experience and you told us how because one thing that we talk about in this class is how we use language for something that matters to us, and how we teach students to think about better ways to use language for something that matters to them, and how we own the languages that we have at our disposal when we start using them for things that are important, and not simply to prepare ourselves for the next test or for the next assessment or for the next standardized event. I mean, that is it's maybe part of it, but it's not it. That is not it. It's part of it, not it. And we always need to think of the bigger picture. So I close with that commentary, and once again to express my gratitude and appreciation for the scholarship you're developing, for the scholar that you're becoming, for the students. Edison is someone you can look up to as a possibility of somebody, a young scholar who's still learning a lot and is still developing and evolving, but someone who's just like you. Is a teacher, is a thinker, is a human being. It's really an all-around great guy. So thanks again, Edison, for joining us this afternoon. For all the students, I hope you got some good ideas out of this conversation with Edison. The questions you posed today were brilliant, and that's important for the conversation. For everybody who will be watching this video, once again, thank you for following this, and remember, this is part of the LSLP in Session series that we host on YouTube. As always, I'd like to invite you to check out all the other webinars that are featuring young and veteran and emerging scholars from around the world, sharing their insights about teaching, research, education, and everything in between. So once again, to everyone, thank you. Have a great afternoon. And as I like to say in this, we are times we're in the middle of. Please, everybody, let's stay safe, let's stay connected, and let's stay together. Thank you, and good afternoon.